Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
David had always been a man of details. The kind of husband who remembers the day of the first kiss, the flavor of the wedding cake, even the name of the waiter who served wine on the night Laura told him she'd gotten promoted. He never forgot Laura's little gestures, how she'd wrap her hair around her finger when she was nervous, or how she'd straighten the couch pillow before sitting down. That's why he was sure he'd married the right woman. 9 years. 9 years of laughter, plans, trips, shared bills, celebrated achievements, and overcome setbacks. They were about to hit 10 years of marriage, and he was already planning a surprise that, he hoped, would make Laura cry tears of joy. David had been saving money for months without her knowing. He booked a resort in the Bahamas, planned a candlelit dinner on the beach, and had a piece of jewelry made with the map of the place where they first met engraved inside. He even wrote a handwritten letter, describing all that she meant to him, folded neatly inside a small blue velvet box. It was supposed to be perfect. They deserved it. After a decade together, their love seemed more mature, calmer, stronger. Or so it seemed. One ordinary Tuesday afternoon, while he was checking budgets for the trip on his computer, a notification popped up on the corner of his phone's screen. Unknown number. Short message. Cold, but sharp as a knife to the chest, Laura isn't who you think she is. She has a lover. His name is Jason. Right away, David's heart skipped a beat. His fingers got sweaty. He read the message once, twice, 3 times. It didn't make sense. Jason? Laura's boss? The married man with 2 small kids, always so polite at company dinners? The same Jason who once complimented David for taking such good care of such a special woman? It had to be a sick joke. A prank. Or someone trying to stir up trouble. But there was something about that message, a strange weight, like it carried some truth. David didn't reply. He didn't tell anyone. He just ignored it, locked his phone, and stood still, staring into space. He didn't want to believe it. Laura never gave him a reason to doubt her. She left home every day at the same time, always got back before 7 in the evening, and on weekends, he was usually the one who worked while she stayed home tending to her plants and binge-watching old shows. It was impossible. Or rather, it seemed impossible. But that doubt started growing like a crack in glass. It began small. Just an unsettling thought. Then it turned into restlessness. Then suspicion. So David did something he never thought he'd do in his entire life. He looked up how to install a GPS tracker in a car. He bought a small, discreet model, and on a Saturday morning, while washing Laura's car, as he'd done for years, he took the chance to hide it behind one of the interior panels. The device didn't make a sound, didn't blink, gave no sign of being there. Perfect. In the following days, David started tracking Laura's routes like an investigator. Everything was exactly the same. Absolutely everything. She left at the same time, went straight to work, never stopped anywhere on the way. Sometimes she'd swing by the grocery store on her way home. Nothing besides that. No detours. No suspicious stops. The GPS showed her car parked at the company building all day long. For 2 weeks, David tried to find something out of the ordinary. He found nothing. That gave him some relief. Maybe it really was just a prank. Maybe someone wanted to hurt Jason or Laura. Or both. Still, there was something inside him that kept on doubting, because the message seemed to know exactly who the lover was. It had a name. And that was the most unsettling part. That was when David started noticing something subtle but revealing. Before that message, Laura used to talk about Jason a lot at home. She'd tell stories about the meetings he led, about his bad jokes, about how he'd scold coworkers who showed up late. There was always something involving Jason. But over the last few days, his name had vanished from her lips. It was as if he'd disappeared from the workplace. David caught on to this in a casual dinner conversation. She was saying the company was renovating the reception area, that the new secretary was clumsy, that they'd switched the coffee in the machine to a more bitter one, but no mention of Jason. The next night, without beating around the bush, David asked, "How's Jason doing?" "You haven't mentioned him lately." Laura froze for a split second, just long enough for him to notice. She answered quickly but with a forced smile, "Oh, he's kind of sad. He and his wife split up a few weeks ago." David made an enormous effort not to show the explosion that went off inside him at that moment. They split up? Jason was the type of guy who posted family pictures on social media every weekend. Laura always said he was really close to his kids. And now, suddenly, he was single? Something felt off. David took another shot, speaking in a low voice like he didn't really care. "Why did they split up?" Laura gave a short laugh. "I don't know, David. It's not like I go around asking him that, especially since he's my boss." She dropped the subject with another spoonful of rice and changed topics. She started talking about the neighbor's daughter who was going on an exchange program. But David had stopped listening. He could only focus on her eyes, avoiding his. Her restless hands, fiddling with the napkin. And most of all, the way her answer echoed like an alarm, "Especially since he's my boss," like she was saying, "It's none of your business." That night, David had trouble falling asleep. His heart still wanted to believe it was all an overreaction, that the message was a lie, that his imagination was playing tricks on him. But his gut was screaming. Something was wrong. And he knew that from that moment on, he couldn't rely on GPS alone. He needed to hear it with his own ears. That would be the next step. The most painful one. The hardest one. The one he swore he'd never take. But now, it was unavoidable. David woke up early that day, even though he'd barely slept. The thoughts from the night before still throbbed in his mind like a non-stop alarm. Laura was in the shower, humming softly the way she always did, unaware that her husband, the sweet, dreamy man she'd spent almost a decade with, now looked at her like she was a stranger. The love was still there, wounded but present. But alongside it, something stronger had appeared, the need to know the truth. While she finished getting ready for work, David moved quietly through the house. He grabbed the small black device he'd bought 2 days earlier, a spy microphone that could be controlled by his phone. It was about the size of a button. He had read all the instructions, tested it, hidden it behind the living room radio, and now it was set. When Laura dropped her purse on the couch and went to fetch a jacket from the bedroom, he took his chance. He lifted the inside flap of her purse carefully and attached the mic between the lining and the fabric. His fingers were trembling, but he was determined. He finished securing it and backed off before she returned. "Han, have you seen my car keys?" she called from the hallway. "They're on the kitchen table, near the fruit bowl," he answered, with the steadiest voice he could muster. She gave him a quick kiss on the cheek, grabbed her purse, and left, saying she wouldn't be long. He stood there for a moment, listening to the sound of the door closing and the car starting up. That was the last chance he was willing to give. He wouldn't ask any more questions or make more guesses. He would listen. And if there was anything to find, he'd face it. With the app already synced, David sat down on the couch and opened his phone. For long minutes, there was nothing but traffic sounds, the car radio, the noise of her typing on her phone. Then silence. She had arrived at work. For the first few hours, everything seemed normal. She greeted coworkers, complained that the elevator was slow again, laughed at some silly joke from someone in finance. She talked about a late report, about coffee spilling on the printer. David's chest tightened. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe this really was just paranoia triggered by someone's bitter message. But then, right before noon, everything changed. The background noise got quieter. He could hear footsteps, voices fading, doors closing. The sound of a doorknob turning. The door shut with a solid click. A second later, a man's voice came through the audio. David froze. He recognized it instantly. "You look beautiful today, Jason." There was no doubt. It was him. David's heart started pounding. His fingers, clutching the phone, went cold. He kept his eyes fixed on the screen, even though there was nothing to see, as if Laura were right in front of him, saying things he never imagined hearing. "I couldn't stop thinking about you last night," Jason said, in a low, drawn-out tone. Laura let out a shy laugh. That laugh David knew so well. The one she gave when she was both embarrassed and charmed. It felt like a stab in the gut. "I can't wait until we're alone again," he continued. "Right here?" she asked quietly. "There's nobody around today. Everyone's upstairs with the accountants." What followed were whispers, muffled laughter, the sounds of kissing and soft sighs. The recording got harder to hear as they moved around the room. David set his phone aside. He didn't need to listen to any more. The confirmation he dreaded was now staring him in the face, and there was no denying it. It wasn't a guess. It wasn't a theory. It was real. It was happening right under his nose. Even worse, it was happening every day. In the same office where Laura claimed she stayed late to finish spreadsheets. David sat there for a long time. His hands on his knees. Breathing heavily. He didn't cry. He didn't shout. He just felt like he'd been punched in the chest. The kind of pain that doesn't knock you to the ground but slowly breaks you from the inside. The trust, the admiration, the plans, all of it crumbling quietly, like an old house devoured by termites. The only thing he could think was, she had the nerve to look me in the eye every night after doing this? He remembered the night before. Laura lying beside him, scrolling on her phone, saying she was tired, giving him a quick kiss before turning away. He remembered all the times she said work was stressing her out. The times she turned down sex, saying her mind was too full. He remembered how she smiled in photos with him, wearing her wedding ring, posting online, "My safe harbor. My eternal love." All lies. Even though he was raging inside, David didn't do anything in that moment. He just saved the audio. Organized the files. And stayed sitting there, staring at the silence that now felt deafening. He knew what he had to do. He just didn't know if he had the strength. But one thing was certain, this would be the last time she walked into that house as his wife. And when she got back from work, David would be waiting. Not with flowers. Not with a romantic surprise. But with the truth. And the truth, when it arrives unannounced, doesn't knock first. It kicks the door down. Night fell on a strange quiet in the house. Not the calm quiet of a comfortable routine, but the tense quiet of a loaded silence, ready to explode. David was sitting in the living room armchair, still wearing the same clothes he'd worn to work, hardly aware of the time. He had his phone in his hand, the audio saved, his heart caught between the urge to confront her and the fear of confirming what he already knew. He heard the hum of Laura's car pulling into the garage. Her footsteps at the door. The keys turning in the lock. Then, as if it were a rehearsed scene, she walked in smiling, holding a bag with 2 tubs of ice cream. "Guess what I got? Pistachio for you, since you love it, and Belgian chocolate," she announced excitedly, like nothing was wrong. David didn't respond right away. He just looked at her with a neutral expression. That made her uneasy. "Are you okay? You seem off." He took a deep breath. He stood up from the armchair and walked slowly to the dining table. There, he'd already laid out a small package with a red ribbon. "Laura. I was going to wait until our 10-year anniversary, but you know how impatient I am," he said, giving a faint half-smile. "So I decided to give you your present today." She smiled, a little unsure. That was when he pulled his phone out of his pocket and, without a word, set it on the table. He pressed play. The audio began with muffled voices. Then Jason's voice came through clearly, "You look beautiful today." Laura froze. The color drained from her face. Her hands, steady just seconds before, started trembling. She tried to stop the playback, but David moved the phone out of reach. "Listen to it all. You owe me that." She fell silent. Listen to everything. From the compliment to the whispers, from the laughs to the muffled kissing. When it ended, the quiet in the room felt like all the air had been sucked out. "You spied on me," she said, her voice shaking, her face in shock. "You cheated on me," David answered bluntly. I can't believe you did this to me. Hiding a microphone in my purse? You're sick." David let out a dry, almost sad laugh. "Sick? Laura, I was planning a trip, renewing our vows, a surprise for our 10th anniversary, and you were cheating on me in your boss's office. Day after day. Pretending everything was fine. That you loved me. That we were happy." She started to cry. She tried to get closer to him. "David, I don't know what to say. It was a mistake, it was just a slip," he cut her off, his voice steady. "A slip doesn't happen every week, with declarations of love, smiles, secret meetings. This was a choice. Repeated, calculated. You knew exactly what you were doing." Laura grew desperate. She tried to justify herself, to deny the obvious, to even turn it around on him. "And what if you did the same to me? If I spied on you, would you be okay with that? Don't compare us, Laura. I never betrayed you. Never hid anything from you. Never lied. You looked me in the eye every day knowing what you were doing. And you still laughed with me, slept by my side, made plans." She went quiet. She was crying now, but softly. She knew there was nowhere to hide. "You have an hour," David said, walking to the door. "1 hour to get your things and leave my house." "David, please." "No use, Laura. I heard everything. I felt everything. You destroyed something I spent years building." Those last words hit Laura like a punch to the stomach. She walked to the bedroom, grabbed a suitcase, threw in what she could. Her hands still trembling, her face flushed. She walked past him in the living room without meeting his gaze. She opened the door and stepped out. David stayed there, unsure if what he felt was relief or pain. Everything felt surreal. The gift he'd prepared for that special day was still on the table, a cruel reminder of all that had been ruined. As Laura lugged her suitcase downstairs, only one name ran through her mind: Jason. She needed answers. She needed comfort. And in her confused head, he was still the only place she could go. So that's how, suitcase in hand and tears in her eyes, Laura ended up knocking on Jason's door. It was a dark, quiet street, and she felt ashamed with every step. Still, she rang the doorbell. She waited a few seconds. Then a few more. She was about to ring again when the door opened a crack. Jason stood there, surprised. He looked tired, wearing an old t-shirt, barefoot. "Laura. What are you doing here?" "David found out everything, he kicked me out of the house. I have nowhere else to go." Jason hesitated. He looked inside, then at her, then inside again. "Now's not really a good time." "What? Jason, you're not actually going to leave me out here, are you?" He swallowed hard. Didn't answer right away. "Who's in there with you?" Laura asked, suspicious, taking a step forward. Jason lowered his eyes. And before he could say anything, a woman's voice echoed from deeper in the house: "Baby? Who's at the door?" Laura's eyes went wide. That voice sounded familiar. Then the woman appeared behind Jason, still fixing her hair, wearing only his shirt. Laura? It was the secretary. Seeing her there, wearing Jason's shirt, hurt more than anything Laura could have imagined. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just looked at Jason, then at the woman next to him, and said in a trembling voice, "You're disgusting." Then she turned and walked away without waiting for an answer. She walked alone down the street, carrying her suitcase and a shattered heart. In that exact moment, she understood she hadn't just lost David, she'd been tossed aside by the man she thought loved her. Laura spent that night at her mother's house, in silence. She didn't want to tell her anything yet. She only said she and David had fought and that she needed some space. She lay down in the bed she'd slept in as a teenager, the same floral lamp on the nightstand, the same memories pinned to the walls, feeling a void she couldn't describe. The low buzz of the ceiling fan was the only sound around her. She had lost everything in less than 24 hours. Her husband. Her dignity. Her stability. And now, even the lover who'd offered sweet promises had shown the same kind of cowardice she herself had shown. The weight of her choices came crashing down on her like ice-cold water. Over the next few days, she quit her job. She couldn't bear to walk those halls and know everyone likely knew something. It felt like walking around naked in a room full of silent judgment. She asked for her severance, signed the papers without arguing about the terms, and left carrying a cardboard box with a withered plant, 2 pens, and a photo of her coworkers smiling, people who felt fake now, as far as she was concerned. Meanwhile, David, on the other side of that silent storm, tried to rebuild his life. His days felt covered in a strange haze, but he was determined not to let the pain trap him. He rearranged the furniture, deleted digital photos of places he didn't want to remember, and got back into his gym routine, which he'd neglected for a while. The wound was still open, and it healed slowly. One day, as he sipped a bitter coffee in front of his computer, sifting through work files, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. The screen showed just one line, "I heard you found out everything." He frowned. The number was new, but the style of the message, so direct, so cold, was exactly like the first one, the one that changed his life. He typed without hesitation, "Who is this?" The reply came almost immediately, as if the person was waiting for him to ask, "I'm Jason's ex-wife." David read it again. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. "I found out he was cheating on me with your wife. That's why we split up." It was like receiving the final piece of a horrible puzzle. Jason wasn't just an occasional cheater. He was a man with a pattern. A smooth talker who toyed with other people's lives like poker chips. And now, this woman, Jason's ex, was appearing like a ghost who had somehow been watching everything from the outside. David hesitated for a second. Then he wrote, "Why did you warn me? I thought, if only someone had warned me, maybe I wouldn't have been so fooled. I figured you deserved to know. That's all." David leaned back in his chair. For the first time in a long while, he felt something like gratitude. Not for losing Laura, but for being saved before falling deeper into a lie. He typed just one word, "Thanks." She didn't reply. The conversation ended there, like it had only been meant to fulfill one last purpose. David set his phone aside. He rested his head against the window and looked out at the street. People hurried by, cars honked, the world kept turning as if nothing had happened. And really, that's how it goes. The world doesn't stop for anyone's pain. That afternoon, he walked to the park he used to visit with Laura on Sunday mornings. He sat on the same bench where she once leaned her head on his shoulder and said she wanted to grow old with him. He gazed at that place with new eyes. Not with hurt or anger, but with acceptance. The betrayal stung. The disappointment even more. But what really left its mark, what pounded like a drum in the back of his mind, was realizing how completely he'd given himself, and how someone could throw that away like it was worthless. Even so, he'd learned. Learned to trust his instincts. To see beyond sweet words. And above all, learned that the truth, even when it destroys, sets you free. And on that old wooden bench, David realized something that would change how he looked at life. Sometimes, life doesn't give you the ending you wanted, but it gives you the new beginning you needed. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.